Hit record. Um, cool. Well, we'll just see where it goes. See where it takes us. But yeah, it should be fun, man. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to this. Right. It is a pleasure to welcome to the show Coach Zach Oliveri. Zach, how we doing?
Good, Damien. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were just chatting before we hit record here. It's been a while. You presented at the very first Lacrosse Goalie Summit. Did an excellent presentation. I know a bunch of people loved it. It's been a while. Been over a year and a half, but it's good to see you again.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Forward to it.
And now, before we get into your goalie career, do you remember where it all started? Like, why did you become a goalie? What was that first time you jumped into goal?
It's kind of, I think it's the same story that you hear probably from most of the people like you have on here is, what happened was I think I was 6 or 7. I've forgotten it over the years. I think it was my first or second year playing goalie and I wasn't too good. I was playing lacrosse in general, right? And I was playing the field. I wasn't too good, and then all of a sudden our goalie didn't show up, and he was legit. He was lights out. Didn't show up, and they're like, "We need a goalie," and they obviously looked at the kid that couldn't even pick up a ground ball, right? And threw me in there, and I remember they put the old school catcher shin guards on me. I couldn't even walk. I'm like my legs are rubbing together. I'm like, "What the heck is this?" And then the first shot came. I was like fearless. Right. And they're like, just step to the ball. And I did it. And I was like, oh, that doesn't hurt. Right. And then that was kind of it. And I just took it from there. And, I was playing for years right after that. And it was just awesome. So that was just kind of how it all started. It was just, it's just, everyone has that same story, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it usually boils down to 3 different stories. And that's one of them is like our team needed a goalie and they threw me in there. The other common one is I had an older brother who wanted someone to shoot on. That's a pretty common story we get around here. So you weren't scared of the ball. That's pretty rare because I would say most goalies, like when they jump in, there is that kind of innate feeling of like, oh no. And what do you think? What do you attribute that to?
I'm not sure. I think, I forgot it was either the coach. I don't think it was my dad at the time, but they were like, whatever you do, just step to the ball, right? And I think it, over years of coaching now and analyzing the position, it's just, not having any thought behind it, right? And just being embracing the moment and understanding like I either can attack this thing or let it play me. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's like where that fearlessness comes in. And if you take that approach to a lot of what we do, you could be successful, and there's a lot more to it, but it really just boils down to, being in the moment, no thought, see the white ball and react. Right. And that, like when things get complicated for you, that when you simplify it, you can even ask high level college goalies now is like, you have to simplify it after you've put in all the thought and all the work and all the training, because when you simplify it, that's when you get into that flow state where you're flying around and having a blast. So I think that's where that's what I kind of attribute it to, is just kind of being like, all right, like I got to see this thing and stop it or it's going to hurt. Right. That was like when I was younger, and then just took it from there. Yeah.
Well, the position can be really complex. And like, I mean, I love it. I study the crap out of it and just love chatting with other goalies and just, ingesting film. But like you said, like, if we can simplify it, we're going to be better. And a lot of times when goalies, or even pros for that matter, or even high school kids hit a slump, it's because they got way too much stuff going on in their head. You know what I mean? It's like they're overthinking this position. You got to go back to when you were a kid, see the ball, step to the ball, save the ball, right?
Right. Yeah. That's why I think it's important, as as I went from playing to coaching, I saw myself kind of go through the continuum of learning and, going through that overthinking process. Once you get to a higher level, and the skill becomes more automatic, you kind of have more room for thought and like, what's going on? Okay. What's going on the sidelines? What's that fan saying to me? So more room for distraction, right? So you kind of got to bring yourself back to just being present and focusing on the moment and whatever you're resorting back to your fundamentals, right? And I think that's where good, solid coaching comes in, and understanding how to work with people in the different phases of of learning skill. So you can kind of get rid of that thinking. There's going to be components of it when you're playing and practicing and training, but you got to always end up bringing them back to that flying around, no thought, just kind of playing and having fun. And that's kind of where I've kind of built my programming with now with that I work with kids is, just taking them through that continuum within a practice.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, they're playing and having fun, right?
Yeah.
Because, so there's not much thought involved.
How do you do that? If you're working with a kid, and let's say he's 14, 15 years old, and you can tell like when this kid gives up a goal, like there's a dialogue going on in his head. I can tell like he's not 100% present on the next play. How do you coach him through that? What's your strategy there?
Yeah. So, I think, when they're at 13, 14 years old, a lot of them are at this intermediate level where they're starting to figure out that, oh, I can step, I can explode, I can drive my hands, and every kid is different, right? So that's why you got to build a good solid foundation, like coaching with them and a good rapport with them and understanding where they're coming from, right? And I think where a lot of the issue comes is, if we're focusing, okay, with too much intrinsic skill, meaning focus on, oh, drive your hands straight or bend your knees or get lower, sometimes that can create athletes to kind of tense up, right? So, and I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but I kind of focus on, if I'm going to cue them, say if it's like during a drill and they made a mistake, if I'm going to cue them, I kind of focus that cue to be more external, right?
Mhm.
Like, drive through the ball, right? Or, just focus on the white, the shadow on the ball, right? And getting them to get rid of that thought of internal so they're not tense and stressed, so everything
Mhm.
kind of flows. And if it's more of, okay, they're just beating themselves up because they let a goal in, you know you got to try and match the kid, whether it's a kid that needs to be pushed a little bit and be like, hey, let's go, snap out of it, or it's more of, hey, you're good, you're at the next one, all right,
Yeah.
focus on just be ready, right? Just play hard, right? Sometimes you just have to do that if it's more in-game situation, right? But
Yeah.
when it comes to skill, it's a little different.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things there I want to touch on. So I love that point. It's like, you can't really, if you give them technical advice, like, top hand here, drive it here, step here, recovery step, then you're just contributing to that overthinking. But if it's simple things like drive through the ball, it kind of encapsulates all of that. And that's like one simple thing that they can use to get back into the flow state. So I love that. It's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Uh,
I couldn't agree more. It's important, and our cues as coaches kind of, we're gonna use those cues where it's just like, all right, drive your hand, right? But you got to have a good balance of it, I feel, right? And I think kids respond really well to analogies, right? Young kids, right? What's your favorite animal? Oh, lion. All right. How does a lion pounce on something, right? Like be explosive, right? Sometimes that, with those analogies that can help them as well. And there's a whole art to it, and you know that. So
Yeah, one of the analogies that I love is a cat. Because like a
mhm.
cat, when it's playing with a toy, it like sits back and like it's patient, right? But it's ready to pounce. It's exactly to me how we are as lacrosse goalies. Like we're ready at any moment,
Mhm.
but then we wait, right? You got to wait to see that shot. And then when you see that shot, boom,
Right.
explosion driving through the ball. So yeah, analogies are awesome.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. Cool. And then kind of going back to your story. So you grew up on Long Island, like huge hotbed of
Yep.
lacrosse still is. Where I imagine you're working with at least get some like decent goalie coaching. Like how'd you go about then just from getting thrown in there to actually learning how to make some saves on a more consistent basis?
Yeah. So it was definitely a lot different than it is now. Which is the good thing about now is that there's a lot more coaching available for kids, right? I didn't have a ton like a private trainer or anything like that. I mean, a lot of times what I remember is I would go in the backyard. My two brothers would shoot on me. It wouldn't last long because someone would get hurt or angry, right? But that's where I did a lot of my work on the side. And then my dad was a ref, long term football and volleyball coach, and he didn't play lacrosse, but he ref lacrosse, and he absolutely loved the game. So he knew a ton of people on Long Island, right? And he would. He met up with, speaking of cats, right? Greg Catrano. I remember he had a meeting, and I guess he met him, and you know asked him, okay, my son's a goalie, what do you think, right? And just got a quick pointer from him, and then met a couple guys that did some trainings, and I met with like one guy once, and I just kind of picked from them because I knew I wasn't going to get one-on-one training every week, right? And that wasn't really that popular then. So it was a couple pointers that my dad found from a friend of his, or, and then I met with one guy once, picked some stuff from him. And then, once I started getting a little more serious, started playing a little bit more travel ball, it was my first year playing travel, and the team was okay. And I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna stick with this team. And then that next year they changed names, and that was the North Shore Rage. So this is around when I was like 12, 13. And, my dad's like, you gonna do travel? I'm like, oh, finally, like, his travel just started to get popular. And then I'm like, who's gonna coach? Like, they're gonna have someone to work with me. And they told me Doc Schneider from UMass. And I was like, all right. And he just had that freshman campaign in 06 where he like went lights out, and everyone knows Doc, right? So, worked with him then and really learned positioning, some simple skills. And like, I was already pretty talented. I exploded to the ball. I had quick hands. I knew how to step, but he kind of really taught me the basic positioning principles, like the 5-step arc, 13. And I was like, wow, this like kind of took my game to the next level. And I just ran with it from there. And then ironically, he ended up being my coach when I was in college, for 3 to 4 years. So it was great. So like, I didn't have tons of coaching, but it was at that 13, when I was 13 is when I met him and got some training. And then even after that, I still just kind of worked on my own. So it wasn't like it is now where kids are training a lot. So I was very fortunate.
Awesome. Love it. How would you describe, your style of goalie play? I think I heard I'm 5'8". I think I heard you're 5'8" as well. So we're like, on the shorter side for the men's game. But how would you describe like how your stance, your positioning, when you were back in your prime? And that's not to say you're not in your prime right now, Zach.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've thought about it, and some of my kids keep trying to push me to come back. But when I was playing and feeling good, I mean, you constantly evolve, right? But I think, to sum it up, when I was playing my best, I was poised and then explosive, right? Where I think poise is one of the words I learned at a young age, just to kind of be patient and wait, and then explode, right? And you can never go wrong if you're explosive, right? But then, I've had moments in my career where, you sometimes got to reel it back a little bit. And I talk to my kids about that all the time, like reel the fishing rod in a little bit and be a little more patient, right? So it's a balance of those two things. So I think that's how I would describe my style. And then I kind of was more of a guy that didn't mind flopping, right, and getting low. And I kind of learned that when I was working with Doc, and then into college. So again, that ties into that explosive, component.
Yeah. Reeling it back in, that's kind of interesting like analogy analogy. Because a lot of times you see those goalies and like they're so eager to make a save, and they're like, they get the happy feet going, right? And like they're just out there. And then, but when the shot is taken, if you freeze the video at that time, like one of their feet is in the air. And like, you can't have that, because let's say I need to drive off that foot. Guess what? I need to plant it and then explode. And that, I mean, lacrosse goalie is a game of milliseconds, and you can't lose milliseconds like that. So I love that. Reel it back in.
Yeah. And I kind of learned that, from reflection on my own play, when I was playing my best, when I was playing my worst. And, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, some kids do the happy feet. Some kids are just doing a hitch, which I think, the hitch, I don't think we're ever going to figure out 100% to control it, right? If I was able to figure that out, I'd be a millionaire, right? Because we're always working on trying to control that hitch, where they're dropping their hands or their knees, right? But I think, when you simplify the game, especially when you get to a higher level, being set and being ready is the most important thing. And it sounds cliche, but it comes down to, are your feet set, right? Or you're chopping your feet too much before, you're not set. So how are you going to be able to make the save? Right? When guys like Ryan Brown have their release time is insane, and your feet aren't set, that ball's by you before you even, got your body behind it. Right. So that's where I learned, when if I wasn't set, I wasn't able to focus on the moment, which is seeing the ball out of the stick. Right. Because if my feet are moving, my brain's somewhere else. Even though I think I'm thinking about the ball, I'm thinking about getting my feet set first. If you really think about it, you break it down. Right. So it's being set means you're ready, right? So
yeah. one of the techniques, so you talked a little bit about the hitch, which, you know, if you're a young goalie, you never heard that. It's kind of like when the shot's taken, like maybe you kind of like drop your hands or you have some sort of pre-shot movement. I'm curious what you think about this technique. So I've heard from a lot of goalies that they know they have the hitch, right? And they kind of overcompensate. So like, you know, they set up with their top hand a little bit more out than normal, than you would want in a normal goalie stance, knowing that when the shot comes, like I'm going to be in that right stance. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, so I think I know what you're talking about. So I've seen a lot of kids now, and you know they're doing the top hand extended.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, again, I'm never one to completely change someone's stance depending on where they're at in their development, right? But if it works for you, it works. I'm
Yeah.
not a huge fan of that. Like it makes sense. You're locking everything out, so you're not going to be able to move, right? But if you're already locked out, how are you going to be able to drive your hand to the ball? You got to have a little bit of a bringing it in and then out. So
Right.
it's the same. If they're bringing it in and then out, it's the same as bringing down and then out, right? So I always resort to, all right, are you in your stance? Are your hands up in this box area? Are you in the middle of the cage? Are you comfortable? And are your hands and feet set? Meaning, are they stationary? Are you breathing where you're in the moment and you can see the ball and then just react, right? So I'm not a huge fan of that, but I see how it can work. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, same. I mean, that's really for like all, when you talk about different techniques, it's like, are you like athletic? You know, like, are we in an athletic stance? If it's not athletic, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to do it. Right.
Yeah.
But then does it work? Right. Like go out and take 300 shots. And, you know, are you better off in that setup with that technique than another one? And even like, I even encourage kids in the off season to experiment with it. Because even like, let's say it doesn't work for you, then, you know, great. Then you have more confidence knowing that like, hey, if I set up in this other way, that's really the best way for me. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And like the way you, all right, like you work through it and you experiment, but all right, you know what, this doesn't work, but I know this works, and that's where you get the confidence from, right? And that comes from, like, I was saying, I took some stuff from, one quick little training session when I was 11 and stuff like that, and like, but you hope that you take some of that stuff, you go out and experiment on your own, and that's where your body learns the most. That's where your brain learns the most, is when you're on your own having fun, right? Because you're now in this like state where you're kind of flowing and just doing things and like, all right, let me try this, let me try that. And you're being like an active problem solver. And that's where you really get learning of the skill. Coaching, yes, it helps, right? But it's what happens after. And you know that.
Yeah. I mean, some of the most like fun I had and most best learning opportunities when I was just playing like summer ball, just like pick up lacrosse and just kind of having fun and kind of trying new things out. And what's the other thing that really helps you in your own lacrosse goalie game is coaching. It's like to teach somebody something else, like you have to learn it at this whole new level. And I'm sure you've seen that because you do quite a bit of coaching. I'm sure you've had to do that where like, okay, I know how to do this as a goalie, but how do I teach somebody how to do it? I gotta just learn it at this whole higher level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I started coaching. I was in a senior year in high school doing some trainings. And I remember like my first time, and I was just like, I think I did like 3 drills because I was like, oh my God, like, how did I learn? Right. And then you go through it, you reflect on it, you're like sitting there, like trying to explain it. And like, but that's where you learn as a coach, and then you learn as a player. Right. So, and each time you do it, you get better and better at it. And okay, how is this going to make sense to this kid? Right. How am I going to be able to explain this? Because some kids are auditory learners, right? Sometimes some kids are visual learners. Some kids need to feel the movement. Right. And we're never going to be perfect with it as coaches, but you kind of figure it out. And, when you have to be in that moment and figuring it out with them, you're learning as well. And it's just a really good environment for both people. And I saw it help my game when I was still playing. So I couldn't agree more. I think that it is huge.
Yeah. I saw this question today. High school kid, just starting goalie, brand new to goalie, high school kid. So 14, 15 years old. What tips would you give him, or how would you sort of like, what are the 3 things you should tell him to learn first, not knowing anything else?
Has he ever stepped in goal?
Never.
Never?
Yep.
Obviously, I think first things first, you got to teach him the stance, right? This is assuming he knows you're going to be getting shot on, right? You gotta go over the stance with him, all right, and that can consist of his hands, where his hands are, where his feet are, right? And then I would probably work on hand driving, right? Okay, your hand needs to drive this certain way, right? So then hands, and then his
Mhm.
feet, right? Even though those are all components of the stance, right? I teach him how he needs to stand. How do your hands need to move, all right? And then how do your feet need to move? Um, you know, and then if I was to take you through a session, and this is assuming, all right, you have to see the ball, right? I'm teaching him the whole time. You got to see the ball, right? But go over the stance with them. And then what my first thing is, whether I'm working with a younger kid, middle age, doesn't really matter. If it's the first time working with somebody, I need to see how their athleticism is. And a simple little tool I
Mm.
use is just to see how they do hopping, right?
Mhm.
And we do that in the rehab world, which is where my career is. But you know, just to see how, all right, do they know how to push off and land and control that movement, right? Because when we're really stepping to the ball, we're not. It's not like a step like we're walking, right? We're not just reaching our leg out. We're
Right.
really getting our power from our back leg. And so I always see, okay, can they coordinate that, right? Are they
Yeah.
able to, put that pattern together? And then I look at that and like, if it looks a little funky, all right, that's okay. I get a little assessment from that. So I think I would go over the stance and then I would see that little simple hopping movement where they're driving off the back leg and landing on that left if they're going to that left side, right? So just to see how they move. And then I build my programming from there. So
Yeah. Love it. That's a great answer. Yeah, that's pretty much what I told him. Throw in some positioning. You're gonna need to learn the positioning, like you
yeah,
learned when you were young. Just gets you in the right position in the goal, and a lot of times that's enough to make the save, especially on those in close shots. And if you're a bigger goalie, like that's enough to make the save. So,
yeah,
and then see a lot of shots, right? See a lot of rubber.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
love it. Well, cool. So then you have some, kind of going back to your story, you have some success, I imagine, in high school. What high school did you go to, and kind of how was your career in high school?
Yeah, so I went to Connecticut High School on Long Island, so it's located in the Bohemia. I lived in Ronkonkoma. It's a pretty big district, um, and yeah, so I was playing first real quick youth league with the Comac Youth League. Then my dad started the Connecticut Youth Program, and that was big for our whole program because now kids are starting to play together. You have a feeder program. And then, when we got to high school, we had a really pretty solid team. My ninth grade year, eighth grade, I played JV. Then ninth grade, I pulled up to varsity, but there was a senior goalie. I played a little bit with my brothers. And then that 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year, we had a really solid team. And Kieran McCardle was on the team. Everyone knows who Kieran is now. Like, one of the best attackmen I ever played with. Mike Pellegrino, who played at Johns Hopkins, right? So we had a solid team. We always lost in the semifinals to West Islip because that was when they were really cruising. But yeah, it was a really good career. I think I had some accolades. I don't like really talking too much about them, but like all county. And then my senior year was an All-American. So and there was a solid talent group out of Long Island. 2009, 2010, 2011. The talent coming out of Long Island was just insane. So I was very fortunate to play at a really good time against some really good players. So yeah, high school was great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the talent coming out of Long Island, I mean, there was talent. There was a lot of talent coming out of Long Island those years and the years before. I had Larry Quinn on. I interviewed him, and he's like, "Yeah, I played with Team USA." Larry's talking. I played with Team USA, and it was probably like 80% Long Island guys.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely evened out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Over the years.
It's the sport has grown. So
Right.
now you have athletes, California, Denver, like who would have played football or soccer or baseball. Now they're playing lacrosse, and it's great. I love to see it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's it's still a hotbed, but I understand that it's more around the country, which is what we love to see, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so high school was cool, and I was actually fortunate enough to make Team USA under 19.
Yeah.
And that was a funny story. So it was my, senior year, we have a pretty decent year, we lost in the semis again. Just kind of enjoying like the whole grad party scene after high school. And I'm getting ready to go to UMass, like, all right, whatever, probably should be training more, but that's a conversation for another day. I remember my dad was like, all right, we got a couple showcases or a couple things you have to go to. I'm like, do I really have to do this? Right. Like, I don't really want to go. I want to see my friends. He's like, no, we have something to be tomorrow, right? I'm hanging out at like a grad party, like, just hanging out. I have a tournament. I'm thinking I'm going to a tournament, right? And we're driving down, like, all right, where are we going? He's like, oh, we're going to Baltimore, Maryland, right? And I'm like, okay, like, what is this for, right? And he's like, oh, you're trying out for U19 Team USA. And I'm like, what? So talk about not being like psyched out, right? You're not really expecting to go to this big event, right, with some really top level goalies, right? And I was always like, I don't like to talk about rankings, but I was never really in that top 5, like, and I was just a guy that worked hard. And I go down there and, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to play hard, right? And talk about being in the moment before and just not really worrying about anything. I had no worries at all because I didn't know I was going there until the 6-hour car ride down.
Yeah.
And then I go down there and I'm like, all right. And then I have a really good tryout and they're sitting there like, we got to take this kid. Like, I pitched like 2 shutouts and like the scrimmages and stuff. So high school was awesome because then I had that moment and being on that team was phenomenal, obviously. So, I was confident to say I had a pretty good career at that point. So it was good. But I always like to share that story. It's pretty funny. And, this goes to show that, you just got to hop in and play sometimes.
There you go. Don't hype it up.
Yeah.
Just get in there and play. Rely on all the hard work you put in. I love it. So how was that experience playing with Team USA? I think it was in Finland, right? Those games were in Finland.
Yeah, it was in Finland. So it was 2012. So it was weird because you make the team, right? And I think it's a little different now, how they're structuring it. But you make the team and then, okay, you go away to college and you play your whole year in college, right? So I redshirted that year because we had a really solid, goalie at UMass, Tim McCormick. He's now coaching at Arizona State Women's, and one of the best leaders I ever played with. So I redshirted. I'd be training, doing extra work and stuff. So I was, as much as it was hard, as much as I wanted to, the team to do really well, and we did. I worked hard and went to practice. It was like I couldn't have playing games. So I'm like, okay, like I was essentially training, to help my teammates get better and prepare them for games. But I remember just being like, I have Finland at the end of the year, because like the whole year you're thinking about it. And I don't know how healthy that is for a young athlete, right? But we had a really good year with UMass and we went to the tournament. Unfortunately, we lost that first round. But then it was like, okay, my season's still going. I remember my coach bringing me in and being like, you got a big thing coming up, but don't forget you got to make sure you get ready for the team. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, but I want you to do well there. He's like, you're representing us. I want you to go and have fun. So it was an honor just to be a part of that team, right? I wasn't expecting to ever even be going to the tryout, say the least, and play with some really good kids, Matt Kavanaugh, who lit it up, in Finland. We had some really good defensemen, Steve Jahelka. He's not playing anymore, but he's one of the best guys I ever played with, trying to think of other guys, but we had a solid group of guys. And we played against Lyle Thompson, right? The Iroquois team that was just lights out. And, the Canadian team, they had, I think Joel Tinney was on that team, Wes Berg, right? So all guys that you're hearing about now. And that was, we weren't really doing well the first few rounds. And everyone was like, oh, Team USA, like they're usually the guys, right? So we were struggling early on. So, and then we ended up turning it around and winning. But it was a wild experience. And it was like a giant blur between, the training camps and the scrimmages against Team Philly, which we lost in Jersey, and it was just a blur. Like you just blink and all of a sudden it's over. But it was one of the best experiences I think I've ever had.
That's interesting. Yeah, the build up to that tournament is kind of like the exact 100% opposite of the tryout, where it's like the tryout, you're like, hey, you're going to tryout in 6 hours. And this is like, hey, in 6 months, you've got this tournament. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. You mentioned you guys lost in pool play to Team Iroquois. Like what do you think was the reason you were able to turn it around as a team?
Yeah. So again, we're playing against guys that are lights out, like Lyle Thompson. I remember, I think it might have been in the actual championship game. Guys are like, guys would dive in, catching the ball, putting it behind the back. Like these guys were just so skilled. So we're sitting there and we just weren't on the same page. And, I was a co-captain with Steve and Rob Zappo, who played at Towson. And we're sitting there and we're like, all right, we got to have a meeting. And I wasn't really a big vocal guy. I was vocal on the field, but I wasn't one that was going to stand up in front of everybody. And I'm sitting there, I'm frustrated. I'm not playing my best. I'm just, you're not really expected to play lights out as a goalie in a tournament like that. You're just like, let's get 50% and we'll be all right,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there, we're all struggling, we're like frustrated. I think guys are having a little bit too much fun, kind of lounging around, hanging out. But we met up, we had a meeting, we're like, guys, like we made it into this, into the playoffs, right? Now this is it. Like we're either going home or or winning this thing. And it was kind of like, like one of those like miracle movies or something like that. Like it's like, it's a story. We're all sitting in this room. We're all like sweating. We're all like, what the heck's going on? Like, and I remember Steve was up there talking to us like, all right, like, let's get on the same page. Like we went over some D principles, some simple stuff. I think we threw in, I think Harvard's defense, a little rotation that kind of threw off the Iroquois.
Mm-hmm.
In that whole meeting, right? It was one getting our heads right, but also let's work on some X's and O's and keep it simple. And we kind of went on and did our thing. And it was a coachless meeting, right? Our coach was like,
Wow.
go do whatever you guys got to do. Let's figure this out and let's win this thing. And that's what we did. We just met up, we hung out, and we were all just talking, kind of soul searching a little bit, went over X's and O's. And I guess what we put in helped throw the Iroquois off and, and the Canadians. And then we just, lit it up, and
Yeah.
it was the playoffs was incredible. It was probably some of the best lacrosse I've been a part of. But yeah, I was fortunate to be able to turn it around because I was able to get my first, one of my first championships. So
Love it.
cool.
Love it. Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. You got the gold medal. Is it back at home or where do you got it? You got it stored?
Yeah, it's somewhere.
Somewhere around there. I know you just moved. So
yeah, I have it put in in a frame with the jerseys. I kind of saved the jerseys.
oh yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely a special memorabilia.
Yeah. And then, so it's crazy, you're playing at that elite level, representing the country. And then you go back and, you got 3 more years of eligibility at UMass. And so, and you're playing there. It's great how many great goalies have come out of UMass. Would you credit that to Doc and the way he works with goalies, or is it something else?
I definitely think so. I mean, we had, great goalies even before Doc, right? It's just, they had Sal Acacio and there's a couple guys in between, and then Doc came, and Doc spent a lot of time there working with goalies, and I had a good career. I wouldn't say great, it was up and down, but then, after I left, you had Sean Scanone, right? I did 3 years and then transferred home. When my dad passed, I transferred home to Stony Brook for my 5th year. So when I left, that was Sean's time, and Sean stepped in and played absolutely lights out. Was an All-American. And now they have Matt Notes down there, a kid that I've worked with since he was 10, and Matt's doing a great job. So yeah, I definitely attribute a lot to Doc, but I also attribute it to Coach Canella. He's one of the best coaches, the most legendary coaches around. And when it comes to teaching young kids about life and educating them not only about sport too, but just how to be a man and stuff like that, I think he has developed just a really good program and his recruiting. So he definitely does a good job, finding the right guys. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Did you, it seems like every lacrosse team, or at least the teams that I've been a part of, I mean, you go through ups and downs, right? Yeah. I mean, you unless you're one of these elite teams that never loses, but those are rare. But you go through your ups and downs, like even within a season. Did you guys ever have that at UMass, kind of going through some of those downs like you did with Team USA, and tell me a little bit about that and kind of how you guys got out of it?
Yeah, it was up and down for sure. We had some solid leadership, so I played with guys like Will Manny, Kyle Smith, who's now another coach at UMass. We definitely, and then they left, and then, it was definitely some ups and downs from there. I think, whether you could say it was leadership, you could say it was, we weren't shooting the ball well, or I wasn't saving it. You can always say any of that stuff, right? But I think it
Mhm.
just, I think it's just some things you got to kind of understand are going to happen with the game, and you kind of just got to work through it. And our guys, we went out and we worked hard every day, and there were times where we couldn't tie it together, and you just kind of got to learn from it. And it was just wasn't as good of a career as a unit as we would have hoped, but we left no regrets. You know what I mean? It was like ups and
Yeah.
downs. You just kind of deal with it.
Love it. Love it. So you're doing, or I don't know if you're still doing the coaching now, but I know before you moved to Atlanta, you're doing quite a bit of coaching, including, some college guys, high school guys. Um, what's your approach to coaching? Like, how do someone wants to work with you? How do you go about training them?
So if it's like the first time working with them,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I was touching on before, I think, you should always assess them, right? And in my field as a physical therapist, like that's a big part of it, right? You want to
Mhm.
assess and you don't want to guess, right? You don't want to look at how they're moving. So as I was, started coaching, I started understanding that, I was studying exercise science, and I understood that you have to understand the body. So you always have to look at how they do it first, right? So I always go, all right, let's hop and goal,
Yeah.
right? And I just start shooting on them. Shoot a couple times, like they may let one in. Oh, it's all good. Let's go. I shoot again. They may miss one, and I get my quick little assessment, and then I'll break it down to them, and it depends on their age level, how much I'm giving them, right? How much information I'm giving them. Um, and then I start with the fundamentals: stance,
Yeah.
where their hands are, how they're stepping, right? And I've evolved my drills over the years, but I also use some drills, some classic drills, as an assessment tool, right? So we all know the traditional ball toss drill. I mean, every goalie's done it. And that's one of the best drills around. And I have tons of variations of it. I know you do too. And I use most of the variations, but I use that as an assessment. Okay, because if they're having trouble with the ball toss, right, just understanding that concept, I feel that they're in that lower tier of skill development, and which is fine. They're probably a 9, 10-year-old kid. They're
Right.
not supposed to be able to manipulate an object in front of their face yet, right? That's how science normally is like kids usually start to be able to manipulate an object, which is a stick, and step. You're asking them to do that, but they usually are able to do that around 11, 12 years old. You may get that kid that's like 8, 9, that's just like that can figure it out. That's rare. So I use
Mhm.
that ball toss to see, okay, are they able to track the ball? Are they able to step? Do they understand how to move to it? And then I go from there,
Yeah.
right? Am I going to do that with a kid, um, that's been playing for 5, 6 years? That's 14, 15. If it's my first time seeing him, yeah. But we may only spend time on the ball toss probably less than 5 minutes, and maybe if there's some pointers I can give him there, then I'm focusing more on how it's done. All right. For a younger kid, I may not focus on how it's done. It's more of like, all right, let's just get your body behind it. Let's just all right, just try to block the ball, and then you go from there. So I think that's I think assessment is huge, and you use simple drills to kind of build from there.
Mhm.
And then you just always start with the fundamentals, right? And then you progress your drills from the fundamentals, and I think that's true coaching, right? And I don't want to keep going on a rant, but you have people just go and they'll do training, they'll throw different drills. If you have a structure to it and a reason behind why you're doing it, that's coaching, right? You assess them and you build the program from there, and you progress the drills based on what that athlete needs, instead of just throwing random stuff in the
Right.
air.
Right.
That's
Because they're all
kind of
different. They're all different.
absolutely, they're
Yeah.
all different,
Every
and you have
every goalie is a little unique snowflake.
yeah,
100% different.
that a
But anyway,
hundred
because yeah,
percent.
like you can't, let's say a young kid is just so scared of the ball that when the shot comes, I mean, he's literally like turning, which I've seen. I'm sure you've seen, right? Like the way you coach that kid, way different than the kid who's like not scared of the ball. He just needs to, drive his hands or work on stepping. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and
Um,
and I think it's a good point. Every kid is different in how you approach it, right? But it's funny because a lot of the kids that I've you know I guess been focused on coaching, or been I just kind of fell into this, is that 13, 14, 15 years old, maybe a little older. I have some college kids now, but those are the kids that are now getting sent to me, right? I'll
Mhm.
work with some 9, 10-year-olds, but it's funny because I don't work with them a lot. I also don't think they need a ton of training at that age, right? But that's, it's a conversation for another day. But I don't, it's funny if I go and I have to coach one of those kids, it kind of brings me back to those days where I'm like, okay, I gotta have a different approach because I'm so used to coaching that
Right.
intermediate to advanced level. But that's where I grow as a coach now is when I have to, break it down to kids that
Yeah.
maybe struggling a little bit. So yeah, most of my clients right now are the ones that are like, all right, I'm going, I want to play college, I want to play Division 1, like let's do it, right? And so it's just a different approach. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Love it. You gave a great presentation in that. I think it was the very first goalie summit that we did, which was awesome. The initial one is all about performance preparation and management for lacrosse goalies. Just kind of talking about, like as an athlete, how do we take care of our bodies? How do we? I mean, this is the stuff that you've studied, right? That you got your
Yeah,
doctorate in.
yeah. So, you know, as I was an athlete, talking about my USA days and or UMass, you're banged up, right? You're
Yeah.
constantly in the training room. And as I was studying exercise science, I was like, all right, like I love this stuff. I want to do PT, and figure out like how do I take care of myself? Because I was always asking questions because I was dealing with, an Achilles issue, a hip issue, and just trying to how to keep it on the field. So then I went to school and studied for PT and long road. So, I think it's important, and I think where my focus is going to go towards as my career progresses is, you know, I think I have an overlap, right? I coach, but now I'm a rehab professional. And I think I have a good outlet to be able to educate these kids on how to take care of their own bodies. And that's what I do as a physical therapist. We're helping people take care of themselves and take care of their own injuries. But I think kids don't know anything about it. Like they're like, okay, I just got to go train. I got to go do this training that my mom set up. I got to go do lifting. I got to go do conditioning.
Yeah.
But I could talk about it for hours. Is that there's increase of injury risk with that, right? They're playing so much, and they're overuse injuries, and a lot of that is the rates are going up, and it's because these kids have no idea. So when you get these kids in the clinic, they don't even know some of them don't even know what a sore muscle feels like, right?
Hmm.
And you kind of have to educate them like you're just a little sore, right? Or this is a little flared up, like that's keep putting it simple, right? But I think I came out with that presentation because it's important that we educate kids how to take care of their bodies while they're doing all this training. Can
Yeah.
they do this training? Absolutely, but there's things that you need to do to kind of keep yourself going throughout, and because if you don't, you're gonna at risk of injury.
Yeah. At what age do you think it's important to start considering that? Because I think back to like, when I was playing under 6 soccer, under 8 soccer, just a real young kid, like you're Gumby, like you're real flexible. I'm 41 years old now. I reach down and pick something up wrong and my back hurts for a week. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this whole scale, but like at what age do you think like it's really important that, hey, you should start taking care of your body?
Right. So, it depends. If you're talking about taking care of your body, whether it be like more like rehab stuff or stretching, you know, I think it's that, adolescent age, right?
Mhm.
And people have that old school mindset of like, oh, weightlifting's bad, right? Because but that was based off of some stuff that was done with, injuries that happened with unsupervised professionals, right? So people are like, oh, it's really bad for your growth plates. Like, no, it's not. You know, like around when they're 10 or 11, they just need to learn basic movements.
Mhm.
That's usually where you kind of start without doing heavy load. But if kids can handle it, you slowly increase them, right? But you want to do basic movements, squatting, lunging, right? Moving lateral, right? Simple stuff around that 10, 11 age range. And you progress them from there. It's all safe to do if it's under, with a, qualified professional. But when they're young, like you said, 6, 7,
Mhm.
they just got to play,
Yeah.
right? And I think people forget, like, yeah, the structured stuff is great, but kids need to play multiple sports. They need to experiment, like we were talking about before, in different avenues, so their bodies are getting different inputs, right? If I, and I fell victim of this, like as I focused mainly on goalie, I was just playing goalie, right? And I made jokes with people all the time, like I'm just a goalie. I'm not an athlete, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm good 6x6, but if you ask me, run a sprint, I can't do that, right? And it's because I didn't have enough exposure to all these different sports. So multi-sport athletes, you hear about it all the time, but it's huge. You're just a better athlete overall. So, and to kind of focus the point down to answer your question is that, as kids have this increase in activity, I think it's important that they start adding in, whether it be some simple active recovery strategies, some foam rolling, some stretching, just understanding that there's more to it as opposed to just like, if they're starting a heavy lifting program, just lift. Like, no, like there has to be a good component of a good mix, right? And you got to be a kid and have fun, and balance everything out.
Yeah, love it. Is there anything you've learned in your studies or just, working with your clients, not your goalie clients, but just, your physical therapy clients that you've learned that you're like, man, I wish I knew that back when I was at UMass?
It's a good question. I mean, one, I'm learning every day, right? You learn in every day of your life, you learn about, in my field I'm learning, and, it's hard to say. I wish I knew how to just manage all my injuries, right? Like the principles we learn in school, like, certain strategies to help, like whether it be a strained hamstring or, a pulled calf, right? And I'm using layman's terms, right? Not the medical terms that I'm used to, but because then I would have been able to just go in the training room and do it myself, right? And then, but I think it's more of, I think the one thing I wish I knew is that you got to give your body some days to rest. And I think that's, when you're asking like, oh, when should kids, start, taking care of their bodies? I think if you haven't already, you got to start now, right? Because you need to take days of rest. Kids, especially this year, post-COVID, the amount of tournaments kids were playing all year was insane. And it was back to back to back. And then they're training in between. It's just so much for their bodies. And as they're growing, everything's kind of trying to catch up and figure out what's going on. So, I just think, being able to kind of take care of yourself and take days off. I think that's one of the things
I think that's one of the challenges that, that adolescent high school goalies face right now. It's like you get some of these kids that are just go-getters, like we were talking about Colin Krieg before we hit record on this thing. Guy's a go-getter, he's going to get out there and work. And you have a lot of people with that attitude of like, man, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make Division I lacrosse. And so now where do you draw the line in between that and like, hey, like you can't play 30 days straight, two games a day, because your body's just going to, you got to take care of your body. Like where do you draw that line?
It's hard, and I think if you have the right coaching and people in your corner, whether you have someone that's a rehab professional or anything like that, you can always reach out to them and get more information. But I think you got to listen to your body. If you can't, if you're run down and you're exhausted and you can't even stand, cut on the field without feeling like a little off, or like, oh, that hurts a little bit, like that's when you're like, all right, like, maybe I'm doing a little too much, right? And we always tell, I'm working with these young athletes, like, listen to your body, right? Pain's okay, right? But if it's to the point where you got a little hobble in your step, like, all right, you may need to tone it down. You may need to go, get someone to help you out, or, take a couple of days off. We deal with kids right now that, it's like, all right, they're doing their practice. They're doing, they're seeing a strength coach. And then they're asked to do rehab 3-4 times a week. And it's like, we have to sit there and manage what we're doing and help them get better. But it's like, we may need to tone back what they're doing, their volume during the week. Let them heal, right? Because the body's just going to heal at its own, time frame for, however that body is going to do it. Where, younger kids heal better than older people, right? But, if you're doing all this volume, your body can't catch up. So you got to, I think it's, to keep it simple, just listen to your body. If something's not feeling right, take a day off, stretch it out, roll it out, right?
Yeah. It's great advice. And listen to your head too. Like if at any point, like it doesn't, you lose the passion or you lose the fun, it stops becoming fun, then like something's wrong, because lacrosse is a beautiful game. It's meant to be enjoyed and have fun. And like, if it's not that for you, then like take a break. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've all been there. So
Yeah.
you know it.
Awesome. I love it. So talk to us a little bit about what you're doing right now. Do you take private clients or I know you've got the physical therapy going on, but talk to us a little bit about that. And then are you still kind of coaching on the side?
Yeah, so I'm just, right now I'm coaching. I've been moving around a little bit right now in the South, but I'm still traveling back to New York, and I'm planning on the fall traveling back and doing some goalie stuff, some clinics. So I'm still coaching. I'm starting to build a really good group down here of young athletes and young goalies, and I'm doing more of field players and goalies, because I'm kind of mixing in a little bit of the rehab and whether they need performance training, strength and conditioning. I'm doing some of that. And I've, also working with my group up in New York. And then with rehab, I'm working right now, at Emory Clinic with Emory Healthcare in the sports and orthopedics. And, good mix of, population, masters athletes, people that are playing tennis at 50, 60 years old that are in some of the best shape I've ever seen. And then working with some young youth athletes, and building up my, getting a lot of lacrosse players. We're seeing a lot of soccer players, and so I'm getting a lot of experience there and working in that rehab setting. And it's a totally different setting than coaching. So it's,
Sure.
you learn a lot, and you kind of mix and match and blend philosophies, but that's what I'm doing right now. That may change, I do want to kind of end up going on my own and continuing doing what I'm doing with the lacrosse community. It's something I love. So, but right now I'm doing both and trying to do as much as I can. So, in New York, I have a couple guys that are now, helping me out with the kids that I'm coaching up there. So I have a pretty solid group of guys that have helped. So that's growing, and I'm just trying to influence the community as much as I can. And whether it be lacrosse, rehab, everything. And I think it's just there's nothing better than being a part of your community and doing good things. So,
Yeah. Nothing better than that, right? Nothing better
yeah.
than that. I love it. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Tons of fun. If you're going to leave the goalies out there with the final piece of advice, what would that be?
Play your game. I think when I was struggling, I kind of lost who I was as a goalie. And I think it's important to, remember where you came from and, what got you to where you are. Right. And just play who you are and play your game.
I love it. I thought you were going to say, get a good pregame dance routine, because I've seen you on the field with them moves, Zach. You got them moves, baby.
Man, I didn't think you'd find that out. But yeah, I mean, that when I was playing, when I had my best games, I was feeling myself before. So whatever you need to do to get yourself ready, to play your game, that's what you got to do. So
Yeah, I talked about it with Colin Creek, because there was a little bit a reel that I did of him kind of just grooving in between the like timeout, and
yeah.
Same thing with you. You watch it, you just feeling the pregame music. It's like, It tells me you're loose and just into it and having fun. That's the way you got to be.
Yeah, and then that's what you got to do. You got to have fun with it, and you just got to play hard.
So play your game and dance. There you go.
That's it.
Leave it at that. Zach, thank you so much.
Damon, thanks, man.